Hello, I'm Claire Poole and welcome to the Climate of Sport podcast, the show in which you get the inside track on all things sport and sustainability globally. Join me every week where I'll be chatting to a special guest about news, opinion and insights on how sport is moving to a more environmentally friendly future or taking action on climate change. Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of the Climate of Sport podcast with me, Claire Poole. Absolutely delighted today to be joined by Lee Spivak, who is Senior Manager of Advisory Services at WM. Lee, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be talking to you today.
It's so nice. I know, it's so nice. And again, wonderful, loads to talk about the work that you're doing and your involvement with the movement globally, etc., as well as obviously your work at WM and what the leadership is the leadership that's being provided over there. So as we always do, I want to start off the pod with a little bit of background about you. I want to hear about how you landed into this space, how we're at this point of having this conversation. Talk to us about your background and how you ended up in sport and sustainability.
Absolutely. Let me also just say thanks for having me today. I love the podcast. I find the topics really fascinating, and I love the work that you're doing. I'm sure you see this as just my podcast, but it's exciting to be part of this. So thanks for having me. To answer your question, I've had kind of a unique career path, I guess is the way to say it. Like going way back, undergrad in psychology, and then totally did what I don't usually recommend people do and jumped right into grad school and did environmental policy in Chinese, and wanted to not do policy anymore after that. And I worked a whole bunch of jobs in grad school. And then right out of grad school, I got a job with WM, and I've been here for 11 years. Wow. The team has evolved quite a bit over that time, but we've had basically a consulting team for like 16, 17 years or so. I think at the beginning, we were a bit like ahead of the curve almost, like offering circularity evaluations and customized implementation programs that a lot of customers, they just wanted waste audits. But at the same time, I did a lot of waste audits, which I try to emphasize because I think now I have a very cool job. But I'd like to let people know that for years I did waste audits, on top of working on our CDP reporting, our Carbon Disclosure Project reporting, our Dow Jones Sustainability Index reporting, the WM Phoenix Open, which is the largest attended golf tournament in the world, and then working with hotels and retail and grocery store chains, universities, really kind of every industry, really understanding the materials that they're taking in, their footprint, their operations, engagement strategies, and assisting with some of that CDP and DJSI reporting was reinforced my background, and was just some of the best training you can get in terms of working through complicated emissions calculations for a large corporation. So that all has evolved over time, and now I oversee the advisory services team, and really our sports and entertainment makes up the majority of our work at the moment. We work with leagues and stadiums and large events, golf tournaments, a few zero waste events, really kind of running the gamut across the sports industry and helping them with a lot of impact analyses, a lot of stakeholder engagement, and a lot of mostly developing sustainability strategies, a formal plan that has short-term goals, long-term goals, and then how to implement that. So it's quite a lot of fun, to be honest, at the moment. Coming through all that and having that background to be able to assist on a pretty deep level.
Absolutely. And I feel as though it humbles us all in terms of anyone in sustainability has, is obsessed with bins, with trash cans. There's so many photos of us all around trash cans. And that's the base of where I think every single person in environmental sustainability has come from. So you've got a long legacy of leading that with waste audits, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not a cool party trick, but I don't have to do waste audits as much anymore, because if you tell me a type of facility, I can tell you what their material issues are. It's like it's having that background. It sounds gross to a lot of people, which it's not. It is, but it's also extremely informative, and that's what WM focuses on is comprehensive material management. So it gave me expertise that, looking back, I don't even know that I was fully aware of that I was gaining at the moment. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you've shared a bit, you've already shared a bit about your background, and then we'll start to talk a bit about WM. But tell me about sport in terms of your passion for sport and how this has come about. Because obviously WM, as you said, you've worked across so many different sectors, and I know you work across sport and entertainment as well. But where did the sport nexus really start? And you're obviously a massive sports fan yourself.
Yes. Yeah, that's where it started, was, childhood obsessions with major sports leagues. But it came across very naturally. I didn't join WM assuming that this would be a focus, but it really started with, a decade now of working on the WM Phoenix Open, which it schooled me. I started at the very bottom of the food chain in terms of responsibility there, and have obviously worked my way up to kind of lead our sustainability work and have it integrated across different departments. But it's been zero waste validated for a decade. We have achieved the Gulf Environment Organization certification. Shout out to them. A huge fan of GEO. We do an emissions inventory, helped start a water restoration program. Like that all was just getting my hands dirty on what I like to call the nerdy sustainability stuff, but also understanding what it takes to throw an event that has now, high hundreds of thousands of people over the course of a week, but it's actually 8.5 months of zero waste. Most people don't know that. We're not trying to just do the week of, because that's not really the whole footprint of the event. So I'm kind of giving you the examples because that was my sustainable sports education, and being able to, we kind of see it as our lab. So we get to be creative with it. We get to try things out there. And then we took those learnings and our industry understanding, again, nerdy sustainability expertise, and started offering that more. And it really kind of took hold in 2018, 2019, with more organizations jumping on board. And then I don't know, Claire, the last 2 years have been kind of a whirlwind. Coming out of the initial phase of COVID, it feels like a lot of organizations not only prioritize this, but put a budget behind it and found value in it across a few different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about, just because you've mentioned it, as you said, this idea of the Phoenix Open being a sort of lab, which then you can parlay the expertise into helping others as well. What are the sort of learnings that you've seen come out of that over the past couple of years, or things you've tried that have worked really well? Or, tell us a little bit about some of the things you've trialed there.
Yeah, it's twofold. Part of it, and this is why I'm just obsessed with events in general, is this larger ripple impact of how an event of this size impacts the people who throw it and the people who are involved with it, as well as the people who attend it. Yeah. So some of it is just taking the trash cans off the course in 2012 and internally kind of having people understand that. And I've watched prioritizing zero waste, prioritizing sustainable material management change the fabric of my company. Because it's on the sports sustainability side, some people may write that off as kind of the foundational element, and it's not something to brag about as much anymore. But from the process of throwing the event and having to work those considerations into a 14-month planning process, we start planning for the next one before the first one even happens, because there's so much involved. That just kind of setting that target internally and letting and doing education around it has been one of the most rewarding things for me, because it's just changed perceptions across the company. In terms of trying things out, it's, emissions inventories are very complicated, and the scale that we deal with is just massive. So how to deal with 25 food vendors, how to deal with construction over the course of 8 months, how to deal with prioritizing material management when costs are a concern, because golf donates a lot of money to charity. So if you use more expensive building materials, then that might take away from the bottom line, and then kind of negotiating that. Getting a water restoration program off the ground and seeing the value of sponsorship and how organizations can get involved. There's been a lot of learnings from the process where, when we talk to people about it, it's a little intimidating. And I remind them that we've been doing it for a decade. So no one's expecting you to do everything we're doing right away, but we can take that learning process and speed things up for our customers, which is really how it's evolved. Is, again, comprehensive. How do you develop a strategy focused on all the impacts, not just weight-based targets
Mm.
or simplistic education. You really want to make sure you're covering all your efforts.
All those bases, exactly. And for again, just to maybe finish up a little bit more on the Open, have you got plans? Have you got long-term goals for the Open in terms of, again, maybe using it as a sort of cornerstone or a showcase for what's possible? Have you got that in your mind, whether they're, obviously what's in the public domain or what you're comfortable to talk about, but is there sort of plans of what you're trying to achieve with that and what that might look like?
No, absolutely. So we were the first golf organization to commit to the UN FCCC Sports for Climate Action Framework. So we have formal net zero targets, which is very complicated, but something that we feel like is very necessary to cement. And I should also say, real quick, shout out to the Thunderbirds, who are the host organization. They've been putting on the tournament for, it's like, I'm going to get this wrong, but it's like 85 plus years. Yeah. And they are, when people ask how we do this, like they sign the contracts with the vendors. They do the budgeting for the whole tournament. They bring us in and really open all of the doors and are supportive of quite literally everything that we ask for. Not that there aren't hurdles, but that's exceptionally helpful. In terms of these longer term goals, we have obviously those emissions reduction targets. I think in terms of it's often surprising to hear this from what people identify as a waste hauler. We're really an environmental service provider, North America's largest comprehensive waste management environmental service provider. But focusing on reuse and minimization is really one of the things that we try to grow every year. So we've done a pilot, we've done a smaller pilot, and we're hopefully growing that pilot and trying to figure out ways to not just capture materials for their next best use, but also reduce that footprint and speak to the value of that, which is it's complicated at the scale. It's not, a small pilot looks really small at our tournament, when in reality that at any other tournament is pretty legitimate. So it's kind of taking steps in that direction to really think through the full life cycle of materials and not just, hey, we're trying to dispose of everything away from a landfill and the avoided emissions, optimizing avoided emissions.
Yeah. And that full life cycle approach, I think, again, from the conversations we've had before, and obviously I've had the pleasure of chatting to you and working with you over a number of years and being involved together with the UN Sports for Climate Action Framework, etc. But that, I think, comes through a lot in terms of you, in terms for the ethos side of thing, the holistic approach, the full life cycle. It's not about just ticking boxes, is it? In terms of this, you're really looking at things across the board and holistically, and from a social perspective as well as environment, etc. It feels very excuse the simplification, but we're not just ticking boxes and putting press releases out. It's like a real deep into, you're not going to see this, this is going to take a while to get to where we need to be because it's a massive undertaking.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really crucial point for people to realize, that weight-based targets are valuable in one way because they are an engaging communications effort, and they usually speak to the right value that you're going for, but they often don't cover minimization and they don't cover the full life cycle of a product. So it's if some materials can be reduced significantly on their production side and have a more complicated disposal element that has to be considered, but the overall impact is very clear going in the right direction, then we're not going to stand in the way of that. And that's really important. Again, internal and external education to try to make sure that, the company that does recycling and disposal services for millions of people across the country, municipal, industrial, commercial, everything, that they're understanding internally that we need to reduce our footprint in terms of a material management and not just diversion. So I think that's a perspective that I'm constantly championing. I'll say zero waste. I'm not like anti that sometimes, but I also think that it's a goal that can be almost in its own obstacle. If you think that that's the best approach and you're focused on this 90% diversion number, what if you minimize 25% of your material consumption? That's equally an important goal. So it's really about, again, we've said this word too many times, but comprehensive analyses and making sure that everything is trending in the right direction and not just like you said, checking a box.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is where people start to struggle. And I think we try, in terms of the simplification of it as well, it's not about being overly complicated for the sake of it. But, some of this stuff you do need a little bit more expertise on. And I think that in terms of my position in the industry and the conversations I hear and, what we'll talk about at the summit and what we talk about on podcasts and within the community, etc., is that sport at the minute is relatively early on in this journey, and there are a lot of questions, and people internally at sports organizations across the board don't tend to have the expertise there, and it feels very overwhelming. So sometimes sort of backing away and thinking, well, we can do some bits and bobs and hopefully that'll be enough. We know it's not going to be enough and that we really have to wrap our arms around this. But this is, again, would you reflect on that as a challenge that comes up in your conversations as well?
Oh, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Emphatically, yes. Obviously, for my response. So that's part of our strategy. When you're taking a major sports league or a football stadium or a massive marathon, you need to set up those kind of medium and long-term goals, but then you also need to find some quick wins that kind of galvanize support. And speaking to what you were just talking about, like, are you going to reach zero waste right away? No. But can you make sure that your recycling is really clean and your compost is really clean and you are then kind of reflecting on what's left? Yeah, we don't just come in and tell people to hit 90% right away. You have to build that foundation that's really important. So we kind of specialize in helping organizations get off the ground, is what it feels like in the last year and a half in particular. And that it can be complicated when you're doing in-depth emissions calculations. That can take a little bit of time. So how do you, and this is where our operational expertise comes in, where we look at their facilities and we find some quick wins to show how we can help develop value pretty quickly. And then at the same time say, okay, well, over the next, few months, we're going to put together some impact calculations that will guide your next 3 to 5 year strategy. But in that next 6 months, here's what we're going to try to knock off. I think that it sounds really basic, but kind of that's really crucial because that makes things tangible for partnerships groups and marketing teams and leadership to see, oh, well, we increased diversion by 20% in 6 months. What's next? You know what I mean? It seems so intimidating, and I hate giving the advice of just get started, because I feel like that's what people say, but it is just getting started, and it's doing it the right way and not being scared of saying, scope 3 emissions are too much. We can't handle that now. No, you have to get involved. You have to start, because it's going to take you a year, maybe if you're a big organization, to get through it all. So how do you, over the course of that year, also build up the foundation? So then after that year, you can go to 3 new sponsorship partners and say, look, we have a foundation here. We know we have to reduce these impacts. We can tell you the percentage of our energy usage, our fuel usage, our procurement footprint, and how you can help us. And that's what I'm seeing like a lot, is how sponsorships are driving change in sports, of how, and I know that, again, like, just I'm throwing all the cliches out on this podcast, but it's what drives sports. It sounds basic, but it right, check the box. It's what drives sports, ticket sales, concessions, and sponsorships. And so how do you create a foundation with these quick wins, with these long-term goals that then attract organizations that want to be part of your solutions? That's what we set up across virtually all of our projects. It's a top priority.
Yeah, and I think that's great already, sort of great takeaways in terms of this conversation and the podcast, because I think that people feel it's one or the other. Like, you either do something that's quite top level to be able to get some good press and feel as though you're doing something, or you do it properly. And the fact that you can do both, and that you can keep, you can have the work grinding away in the background, but you can still set interim goals and targets that you can shout about and, share leadership on, etc., in certain areas. I think that's massive for people to think about, especially if they're at the start of this journey. And then this connection with the commercial side, again, I think we're really only at the infancy of that in terms of, purposeful activations and sport leveraging the opportunity there, because we've covered it across different people I've spoken to on the podcast. Again, in terms of the commercialization side and what's the cost. And when I did the pod with Norman from the Eagles, we were talking about, and he was like, Claire, if people start asking about how much is it going to cost me straight away, you've lost them. Forget, we need to be looking at what are the opportunities, what innovations can we bring in, how can we get these experts and these commercial organizations to help us. And I think that mindset is starting to change with people now.
I find it really fun to, you intro some ops people, some leadership maybe initially, but very quickly bring in those partnerships and marketing teams, because they have expertise that sustainability experts don't necessarily have, and they're going to play with your foundation in a whole new way. Of, I can create 6 new sponsorship categories that you've never heard of, but I don't really know your core values the way that so you're going to think of 2 others that may be like among those top 6. Yeah. Like it's really and how to get sustainability integrated into the thought process of different departments is not something people should be slowing down. That's something that has to happen quickly because it may take some time, and it's really key to bring in everybody, because it's just not, it's so collaborative. Again, another cliche. It's so collaborative.
Can I follow up with the cliche with moving out of silos? I think we need
Yes, there you go. Moving out here. Thank you.
That one.
That was perfect. It ends up being like, again, the Open's a good example, and I'm going to speak about that, but this is what we do across our other projects is how do you create a task force that maybe has a core smaller group for efficiency's sake, but is meeting at a minimum quarterly to understand the project, to understand the goals that are being discussed internally, to have that formal process set up. It's exactly what you're saying on the previous podcast. It's, if you're wondering about like time management and if this is valuable, like it is. And every company is hungry for not just their logo on things anymore. They want to show what the purpose is behind that logo. Yeah. And that's key to us because we have really silly brand recognition. People know that WM and they don't even know why sometimes. So part of my job is how do we create that tangible example in their life that they know, oh, at that WM, they're working at that baseball stadium. And I heard that they are, achieved a certification and are reducing emissions. And that person's probably pretty nerdy that I just gave if they're giving those examples, but maybe they played a fun game and there's a lot. Yeah. But I think that platform is just unrivaled across industries, which is, why I have a job, why this is taking off and why there's so much value in it across whatever company you are. This is a place you want to be.
And just following on from that point about the commercial side and bringing other people in, there's a very simple answer to the question I'm about to give you, but let's see if we can find anything else. We often have conversations with people sort of saying, I'm in X job title at this organization. Maybe I'm in facilities, maybe I'm logistics or whatever. And I've been given environmental sustainability, but I'm not an executive. I'm not at the top of this. It's not really my place to be bringing teams of people together internally around this yet. Or advice is always, we'll just go and speak to people, sidle up to desks, let them know. Have you got anything to add to that in terms of ways we can help people bridge the gap on that? Because I feel as well, I often in conversations feel there's a bit of impotence around people having sort of being empowered or having agency to drive this because they feel like, well, my remit's this. And, am I overstepping to then go and speak to all these people in different departments when that's not actually my remit yet? And we haven't got that executive level buy-in, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it's your advice, but also don't get discouraged. Because what I've seen is at some point it weirdly just clicks for an organization where someone in leadership or someone advising leadership or an operation at the organization just it creates a pretty rapid adjustment to say, oh no, we have to prioritize this. Yeah. So it's exactly what you said. I think creating a formal process of, yes, let's go around and talk to people, but like, how do we meet regularly? Yeah. And just talk about this as a priority, because one of the issues that I've seen, and this is true at large organizations that I've worked with and not worked, where people have 2 job titles and sustainability is one of them, and operations or other priorities take over and sustainability is put by the wayside. So it's be that champion, but then also find some allies. So you're not trying to, because there's so much of this and it can feel overwhelming that maybe someone needs to make sure the marketing team is up to date. Yeah. Maybe someone needs to make sure the ops team is communicating the changes they're already making, which your ops team is very likely already doing things that you can talk about. So it's not one person trying to do it all is why you bring in a team of consultants. And if you want to do that, that's great. If you want to build it internally, I fully recommend that as well. Don't hire consultants if you don't need them. Yeah. And it's important to just galvanize support and really reach into different departments to do that, because you'll find someone in comms, someone in marketing cares about this. Yeah. And so how do you get an hour every 2 weeks from them to work on this, like really
Yeah.
minimal support. But it's when you see one person just driving it and not creating that solid infrastructure internally, it doesn't last, and it's really discouraging. So keep your head
Yeah.
up if you're that person.
Absolutely. Great advice. Great advice. And also, I think, get permission to send an email to all members of staff at a football club who we know sent an email out because they were starting to look at this space to gauge interest on people who cared about the environment in any different role and just wanted to get together over a lunch or whatever to have a chat about what they could all do. And they got like 30 responses of people like, yeah, cool, I'm interested. I care about the environment. It's not their core job, but they care about it. And to take an hour, as you said, over lunch or whatever, have a lunch meeting and everyone brings their own lunch and have a chat about this, or even that, it doesn't have to always be led in a formal way, does it? It could just be colleagues getting together talking about stuff they care about and how they can use their platform and influence to try and make positive changes.
And I think people kind of quickly find the value, though. I think you're spot on, but I think once you have those conversations, it just needs to click in one aspect. And maybe, I guess the other piece of advice I would give is find examples that are directly in your sports world, but also just outside of your sports world that are probably on your scale. If you give someone, hey, this is what the Olympics is doing, oh my, of course, that's the standard. But also it's a little intimidating. It's why I kind of divert away from the WM Phoenix Open sometimes, because I want them to see what we're doing at other golf tournaments and other organizations. But putting together a list of sponsorship examples that you've seen, putting together a list of like public goals and targets that have been set, or websites that look really cool and are engaging and are simplifying some of the messaging. It's really out there now. It's not hard to find these things. So I think one of the ways that I've helped organizations galvanize support is creating that list of examples that they can feel competitive about, of like, hey, oh, there's another NHL team that's doing this. Like you can watch them kind of like sit in their seat a little higher. Like it's sports, they're competitive. So I think that's the other thing I would do is try to show what the opponents are doing, show what these other teams are doing. And that can, I'd say oddly, but it sort of makes sense in this world. It gets people on board faster.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's loads of learnings there in terms of things that people can take away, especially if they are thinking about how they can move things forward more themselves inside their organizations. So just to move a little bit wider, I guess, and get your perspective. Obviously, you've been in the industry across various forms for a long time, and then within sport now for a good number of years. You're in North America. Your work, predominantly, if not exclusively at the moment, is based in North America. Give us your perspective on sustainability in sport in terms of the bigger challenges or barriers you see to do more, and of course, the opportunities that maybe we can start to leverage. But I think getting that insight on sort of trends or challenges or barriers is a good place to start in terms of how people are feeling right now.
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's important that things like this are relatable and helpful. So I guess I think I'd add that we do some international work in terms of impact analyses and creating kind of operational tools and plans. I think that's given me, I'm only pointing that out because that like helps me reflect on the US and Canada. Where we do most of our work, because it's a lot of organizations are just starting off, and it's really nice to look at these gold standards for program development. But it's really important to remember that the majority of companies are figuring this out, and that's why Claire and I have said that, like, how many ways you can say just get started. And but it's important to see that around you and not feel like, because this is risk management. A lot of organizations are very concerned about doing something and then having to talk about it and the critiques that come from that, which is why you've heard me say comprehensive so many times, because if you focus on waste and you ignore water and emissions, then you look like you're missing something. But I think it's really important to like feel the community is starting off, even though you see these high valued examples, and that it's important to measure things, but it's also important to get started wherever you can. I think, so I commenting on the US and Canada, I think one of the most challenging areas is fan satisfaction.
Yeah.
Where you talk to organizations, they're like, this is great, but also we need to make sure the fan experience is the priority, what the product is. Of course, that's what it is. But when it's food, that could be reduced very quickly in terms of its footprint. When it's vendor operations, when it's build outs, the constant need for development that we see, these organizations that have sustainability as a core value, but they're building buildings. And it's like, that's great. You can do that the right way, but you really need, that's got to be on par with your other targets too. So that's what I see as one of the biggest issues is kind of the at the heart of sports is the show, is an extravaganza. And so how do you put that on, minimizing it at the same time? It's very complicated, which is why we try to instill this foundation of operational excellence in terms of like everyone sees sustainability as part of their job. And how do you set that up so these people that are at the heart of the development and are at the heart of the fan experience are thinking about things the way that you need them to? So it's not, you're not that person in the room that has to be a part of every conversation and be like, well, our VIP gifts need to be reconsidered. It's like, they probably do need to be reconsidered, but you probably want a team of people thinking that. And when you're looking into it, getting different priorities. And so I think those are some challenges that I'm dealing with that are very relatable and things that people need to take a deep breath and accept as challenges and work through, because that's the process. It's not more complicated than that.
Absolutely. And I think that's a fascinating one. That is, here's the thing. I think if we cut right down to it, human beings love something for nothing. It doesn't matter. I think over the years I've worked with such high level execs, and I could tell you a story of running a conference of very, very high level execs many years ago. And I never got better feedback than the time I put them all on the exec lounge level, and they all got to use the exec lounge for free and could eat peanut M&Ms and drink free alcohol as much as they wanted. Like, it's people, it doesn't matter how big your salary is or how people love free stuff. And I think that again, this I think brings the point in terms of a trend out of sport can't change this by itself, can it? There's a whole sort of societal shift that's needed before we can all play our part, because until bigger stops becoming better, until jazzier stops becoming better, until free stuff and tchotchkes and whatever it is, gifts and all that kind of stuff stop becoming what people want and what they crave and what they expect, we're always going to tackle these problems. And I think this is where sometimes we can lose way a bit, because we want to try and drive as much change as we possibly can, but we also have to accept that we're going to have to work with other sectors, other partners, and with governments, national and federal, other different industries that intersect with ours, etc. There's a lot of stuff that needs to happen before we change the ethos around that, and I think that can feel overwhelming. But I think we also have to, whatever they say, eat the elephant a bite at a time, or whatever it is. How do you do anything big? As you said, just get started. But I do think that's good for people to think about in terms of, if they feel as though, well, I can never change this, how can we play a role into connecting with others who can help drive these bigger changes?
Well, and that's exactly. And then that's also when people are maybe concerned about the process of measuring impact and how long that can take. It's like procurement is typically one of the most complicated elements of a greenhouse gas inventory, because you're trying to give a footprint of everything that you buy. And you can't do that until you can. It takes some time, but if you want to be able to address the point that you're talking about of, hey, at some point we have to look at this massive part of our footprint, you need to be able to quantify that. And maybe you're going to have to focus on other areas first, but then that huge elephant that you're just chipping away at still in the room, and you have numbers to point to it. And that's where we've seen a lot of success of, okay, you get people on board. Now they're further on board. They see the value of committing funding to this, bringing in sponsors. Now we can start to tackle things that are really complicated. And it's going to take years changes to procurement for massive infrastructure and massive operations. It takes time. So, I think we're just agreeing. So it's not more, but those are the things that we try to when we talk to someone, I call myself a data therapist. Like we try to let them know that they're not alone in this process, that it is complicated and that there's assumptions you make and the value is really there. And there's a process to get there, but it's very clear from a lot of organizations that you don't have to question the intent or the value and how this is going to develop for your organization over time. So that's what gives me kind of So it's exciting to see that become more of the norm now, especially with new EU standards and how many organizations that's going to affect and make things just that's how it's going to be moving forward. It's not scary.
No, absolutely. And it's nice for organizations to get ahead of it as well. I think there's, it's coming, right? It's coming down the pike. So getting ahead of it and getting into a good place before someone's knocking on your door to do it in a mandatory way is a good spot. It's a good spot to be at. And maybe that, I'm going on to ask you about the opportunities. Maybe that's one of the opportunities in terms of getting ahead of this stuff.
Oh yeah, it's without a doubt. So we're seeing in the US, we're seeing more like municipalities focus on zero waste goals and sometimes emissions tracking too. And so now is the chance for organizations in those communities to get ahead of that and look like leaders and have a really cool marketing story to promote about how you're trying to change your industry, change your organization, be a standard for other organizations. If you wait a few years and those requirements go into effect, you become a follower, and it's really hard to promote it as if you were ahead of the curve. So it's really, again, playing on the sports angle of how do we show that we're better than our opponents? Yeah. And that's, I think, what organizations need to lean into, because when you do that, you bring in more money. I don't know how to say it for people that don't. I mean, I think people that listen to your podcast probably care, so it's not the right audience. But I'm always thinking, who am I talking to, and what do they care about? And that's like one of the pieces of advice that I give to like college and grad school students when they have informational interviews, because if you're not thinking about that, you're probably delivering your message wrong. And you need to, if it's risk management, if it's financial development, if it's leadership and just setting yourself apart in some way, those desires are in your organization, and you have to kind of set it up to find the right, to make them click, like we were saying earlier, that they're there, and you just have to make sure that they can kind of come to fruition and be actualized, because every organization has those priorities. It's not unique.
Absolutely. And I think that the mentality as well, that environmental sustainability is altruistic or it's a cost. I think hopefully we're starting to transition past that now, because I think it's just good business sense. The majority of the sports organizations we're talking about are professional sports, and they are they're businesses. And a lot of them want to do the right thing, but also I think there is absolutely, the one element that's like, it is the right thing to do, because we all want our sports to continue into the future, and we want there to be a healthy planet and ecosystem for us to exist on, to be able to do that. So it is a win. But in a shorter term, often these conversations, especially in terms of getting buy-in, do factor around the financial side and costs or opportunities or sponsorship or what that looks like. So I think you're right. I think it's a great point in terms of where we are tabling things internally. Who are you talking to and what do they care about? And then put the facet that's relevant to them forward.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think purpose-driven sponsorships are going to become the norm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's what are you spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on? You're developing your brand. Yeah. And they need to become the expectation too, because then if you are a stadium and you work in some minor requirement for all of your new sponsorships, that shows your sponsors that you're actually committed to it. And it's not one or two sponsorships that are related to that. And everything else is, then you just have your beer company and your transportation company, and those aren't relevant at all. You have to kind of start to set up some guidelines and expectations, and that snowballs in an exceptionally valuable way. And you can talk about it as how we're trying to provide value beyond a logo. Yeah. And that's when I hear an organization approach us like that, and there's I don't do those sponsorships. We have different parts of the company that do them, and I get involved. But that's what that is a solid indicator for me that they're taking things seriously, and that there'll be a story here, and it's not just some fluffy marketing opportunity. Totally. Because that's what I get asked. It's like, is this going to be valuable to develop business in my area? And the answer is yes, if it's real. Yeah. And if it's not real, and you're just want to play a game and that's it, then it's not as valuable. And that's important to identify. And I honestly think it's important for companies and organizations to hear people like me at my organization talking like this, because then they start to internalize, like, oh, this is valuable. I can't tell how many, I have so many, probably every customer we have has at some point been like, yeah, I think our sponsors brought this up a few times to us. It's like, yeah, I made you a deck about it. Like, I know, I totally.
I think I
So,
spearheaded that conversation.
yeah,
Yeah. But
exactly.
that's, again, I think that's a great, just getting down to the specifics as well of how do you do that. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to chair a few sessions for sports organizations where they've started to work on their own sustainability efforts, and they've brought all their partners in to a virtual meeting and said, we want to share what we're doing and what we're doing around sustainability. And we just want to share that with you right now and let you go away and reflect on that. But going forward, we want to talk to you about some of these things and how it intersects with what you might be doing on environmental sustainability and how we might be able to do things together in the future. Again, I think there's a mentality that, well, the sponsors are in now, so that's done. Yep. But we will look at this for new people, new sponsors that come in. And it doesn't have to be like that. You can bring people along on the journey, can't you? And in a very simple way.
I mean, and existing sponsors, it's good to do research on them because they have sustainability teams and they have marketing teams. And when those groups come together and they see a new opportunity for them to activate at your site, it's different. And they want to, all of a sudden they'll change the sponsorship. I've watched it. They'll change the content of their sponsorship details. They don't want that huge sign. They want to help you like with 5 days a year with some activity. And then there's a story there. And it's so interesting in sport in particular because the social, and let me just quickly say, social and environmental impacts are the same thing.
Yeah.
They are not deeply overlapped. There's not parts of them that are intersecting. They are the same thing. Every social impact has an environmental impact. Every environmental impact has a social impact. And it's really interesting in sport where these social programs have existed for years without too much environmental consideration, like as a focus. It's there, but it's not the focus. And how organizations can use that to build out these initiatives is really key, because you have the infrastructure, you have usually an incredible story there. And how do you make sure the environmental aspect of those? If you're helping out a local community center, what's their garden look like? What's their energy usage look like? How are you, creating stable change for them? So you're helping them reduce their impact in addition to, providing a new field or a court or something or tech for them. So I think there's so much opportunity in this to create value within sports organizations that it just needs to be discussed formally. And then I've just watched it very, very quickly, like snowball across leagues and venues and tournaments and everything.
Yeah. So I think there's two things. That one, is there anything more maddening than a sports organization who is doing great stuff on sustainability and seeing their sponsors who are doing great stuff on sustainability, but ne'er the twain shall meet? That makes me so frustrated. So let's change that. So Lee and Claire's homework for you all. If you don't already know what your sponsors are doing on environmental and social sustainability, go and find out and have those conversations, because that, to me, it's probably one of the most frustrating things where we chat to people and they are really getting to grips with their sustainability efforts and they're trying to move things forward. And they've got a handful of sponsors that have got incredible sustainability programs in completely different ways, but they have just never brought those two things together because it's different departments and those departments don't talk. There's such a rich landscape there to get, as you said, quick wins and buy-in.
And if you get a sponsor on board, one sponsor, it again, I'm sorry, I'm saying it clicks with people. They can start to, people that don't work in environmental or social sustainability don't necessarily see how this is going to help them bring in new sponsors or fans. And so when you just give a taste of that, then it's like, okay, well, we need to regroup on a strategy around this. It's not, hey, let's get one. It's like, how do we build this out? And so that's what we try to do, that of just giving them tangible examples. Like I said, I'm sorry, I'm repeating myself, but that's been so effective for us of creating a formal process, asking your sponsors and partners what they care about and doing some research on them, and then making an effort to just get started on something, because then it starts to kind of, everything gets mapped out more readily. And again, just giving cliche advice that people know, but it's to kind of validate those cliches.
But I think people know it. But I think what's valuable about this is that we're all so busy and so focused on the one thing that sometimes you do have to listen to something and think like, oh yeah, I meant to do that. Or, oh yeah, I started doing that. And then so, I think again, this is great because we've spoken a lot about different things on this podcast, but really these things at this intersection, and also how easy it can be to just look at who your current sponsors are and what are they doing in sustainability. That's not a big task. You don't need a full-time person to do that. You can do that yourself in the evening on Google, or you could get an intern to do that. And then all of a sudden you've got a bunch of information that's like, actually, let's talk to these sponsors about this and see what we can do. It's easy, it's accessible, and I think it's a good reminder on that.
Without a doubt.
So before we finish off with the big question about the hope for the future of sport and sustainability, which is the $64 million question, is there anything else in terms of kind of barriers or opportunities, or anything you feel like we haven't touched on yet that you really wanted to sort of get out in terms of thoughts or trends or advice or anything?
I think I'm gonna go back to a reference that I made to our golf tournament, the Diamond Phoenix Open, as a lab. That when you're a huge organization, it feels like you have to implement something everywhere.
Yeah.
And that when if you have 20 events, if you have 30 teams, if you have like year-round events and concerts and games and whatnot, it's I see that the obstacle is that it's just the scale is overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so getting proof points for people, if it's improving diversion, maybe you just start in suites because suites are more controlled and you can capture organics there easily. Yeah. Like maybe it's back of house education and you're not touching fan disposal yet because that's really, really hard. But back of house, you make sure everyone knows and it's part of their job, and you make sure that you're not throwing full bags of recycling with food waste in it in the compactors. Yeah. Like getting some of these foundational elements checked in certain areas will give you more confidence in the scale that you're dealing with. But I can speak to our greenhouse gas inventory from 6 years ago is not impressive compared to our greenhouse gas inventory now. It's not. And so it's I don't think organizations really talk about that. They talk about where they're at, but not necessarily some of the things that they did that were not perfect. Yeah. And I think, I just think don't let the scale scare you, because that to me is a massive obstacle at this point for some organizations. And I think it makes sense. It's very valid. I'm not, disrespecting that, but don't let that stop you. I think that's, that, and then they're like, well, I can't do a full emissions inventory. It's like, well, then get started on what you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That it's just kind of straightforward in that sense.
Yeah. And I think that's another great bit of advice I remember reading years ago, and kind of, information on entrepreneurs and stuff. If you're not embarrassed by the first iteration of something you did, you started too late, right? If you don't go back and think, wow, really, that's where I was at, then you started too late, because everything is a journey and everything is constantly evolving and progressing. And I think we can all reflect on that in our own lives. And as you said, you're much more impressive now than you were then, but you started something and you got going, and you have to start somewhere to evolve into something incredible that you've got now. So don't be embarrassed, or don't be ashamed of where you've started on some of this stuff, even if it is small and has got loads of holes in it and you haven't got complete data. Just, starting.
I got some great advice the other day, which was that simply showcasing an environmental justice analysis in a sustainability report is progress. Yeah. And that to me is a good example, because you're going to find, we do this for almost all of our projects now, where we look at the communities they're in and the environmental risk factors and the demographics, and it's not hard to learn something from it. Yeah. And then people don't want to talk about it because they haven't solved it.
Yeah.
Well, none of us are going to solve inequality immediately, but you have to show that you recognize it as an issue. Yeah. And you have to show that you're maybe making some effort or reorienting your process to consider that, and bringing in those communities to get input from them. So that was a reminder to me of, like, I feel like environmentalists are always going to feel this way. Claire, do you know anybody that's like, yeah, I'm crushing it? Like, I fixed it. Everything's fixed. Though I can't do any more than I'm doing right now. It's exactly. And that's the point of it. So you have, and your podcast has been a little better therapeutic for me, not just this doing it with you, but other episodes where you remind people that you talk to that it's okay to step back and take pride in what you've accomplished so far, because that, I think, is one of my personal issues, where I'm like, okay, well, what's next? What I did last year isn't good enough anymore. So that I think is just something we need to manage in our own our own heads and
Exactly.
our own processes.
And remind ourselves that we are never going to feel that in our whole lives. Like, these issues are global and huge and are going to take everyone to get across. There is never, ever in our entire careers going to be a moment where we think, nailed it. That's it.
Yeah.
Now we can just keep doing what we're doing and then that will be fine. We're never, ever going to achieve that.
It's not, I hit this sales goal and I'm done. That's not how, like, I tell people that I guess I write scopes of work now, but I'm the nerdy sustainability guy that likes designing projects. So I'm never going to be like, hey, I hit this goal and I'm done. I just can't. It's not how I think about things. And I think that's healthier than it feels when you initially kind of go through that. So thanks for the therapy.
That's what we're here for. That is what we're here for. So last question, what, with that in mind, and on the basis we are never going to hit the big goal, we're never ever going to get there in terms of feeling like, yay, we've solved it, what is your hope for the future of sustainability within sport, that you feel as though that'd be decent if we got there, we got to that stage? I think
I'm really optimistic that I see like basically every major organization doing a footprint analysis and creating a strategy. I think that gives me hope, that because once the more organizations that do that, the more best practices are going to evolve, the more case studies are out there, they're going to reach people. I think it's incredibly impactful when you can say, hey, all of these major sports leagues have sustainability advisors and they're creating an emissions reduction strategy and an engagement strategy around it. I think that it gives me some hope. Just stay off Twitter and stop following climate scientists and you can breathe a little bit easier. But I do though. So
it's good. It's good to be informed. It's bad to be,
it is,
terrified.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I think that gives me hope, because I just think the more smart people in the room that are thinking about this, we have the solutions. That's one of the most frustrating parts, is that if we wanted to make a stadium net zero tomorrow, we know how to do it. It's just there's an infrastructure around it that's complicated. So it takes 20 years to do it instead of a year. I also think that working climate into communications, that even if it's not talking about yourself, and you're going to get some people saying, okay, well, you're talking about this, what are you doing about it? And you should have something ready to comment there. But simply talking about it as a sports organization, I think is something that I'm seeing more of that, and that gives me hope. And that to me is, again, another example of, you have however many hundreds of thousands, millions of people listening to you. What are you telling them? How are you using your platform to make sure that they know what you're committed to, that they're seeing some basic science, that they're seeing, conditions in their region? If your community's experiencing drought and you are a major venue and you're ignoring it, you're going to start to look like you don't understand what's going on in your community. So that's where I've seen more risk management incorporated into the process of climate communications. And I just think as sports organizations, we really need to, that's our biggest impact. You can measure and manage what you have on site, but nothing touches the scale of what you have as a megaphone. It's just not even close. So how do you really lean into that, even if it's in a what seems like a rudimentary way of getting people to understand that we're in a climate emergency? It's not climate change. It's not natural circumstances happening. Like, that is an important foundational education block for people, at least in my country, Claire. I don't.
I think it's the same everywhere. It's the same everywhere. And I think I would, I think you're so right on the comm side about the potential, but I would also say there's been instances recently where, sports organizations, you don't even need to go out actively on climate comms. Just please work behind the scenes with your athletes, with your players, with your suppliers, to manage them, that if they're not educated on it, to not say anything, to step away from the conversation. Like risk management. That example of Kylian Mbappe and the PSG manager laughing at taking a train instead of a private jet. The impact of that, fortunately, the impact has been absolute uproar from the majority of people in France about not just the environmental impact, but also how out of touch those people appear in the current social and economic landscape. But within it, we're not even saying, that we expect climate change to be spoken about in every sports conference when we're talking about performance and athletes, etc. But at least engage people behind the scenes so that they understand what you're doing and what's appropriate. I think that, even if you're not ready to go out on climate comms yet, there's still stuff you can be doing behind the scenes to make sure you're helping.
That is a wonderful point. That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we do. And we try to help organizations understand that, like, yeah, you're going to do an emissions inventory. You don't have to talk about it all right away.
Yeah.
Like, this is so you can have answers to questions as they come up and be prepared for a year from now when you do want to make full large scale change. And you're going to chip away at these smaller elements so you have something to show progress, and then you have a bigger strategy. But please work behind the scenes, because it is that's a perfect example of, oh, we don't think this is going to be a thing. And then your fan base is going to get younger. It's only getting younger, and they care a lot more than any other generation before them, and they base their decisions on it more than any other generation before them. They put me to shame. It's like embarrassing. So, it's like, I haven't bought anything in 3 years. Absolutely, totally, me too. It's you as a sports organization, you better be thinking about that fan base development and the risk management of your comms, because then you're in crisis mode and the other things you had planned are not coming out, and you have to push things back, and that costs money, and it's you got to make it relatable. But I guess I would kind of end with like, again, just going back to our cliche, is that my hope is that people really commit.
Yeah.
I give these like behind the scenes sustainability tours at our tournament and other events, and it's really fun. The content changes over time, but I usually end the same way, because I want them to hear a consultant say, "You don't have to hire me." It's the Patagonia example. Like, I don't care if you work with us. Do I think that we have a unique offering and that we have special expertise and an understanding of operations? Yeah, I'll flout our accomplishments, but go get another consultant. Go start your internal team if you can't do it, if you can't bring someone in. Just make sure that it's a legitimate program, and that you're not trying to like do a quick fix, that you're not trying to do one initiative to mask your footprint. Our habitat, our environment is in trouble. We all have to act. And so my hope is that this support that we've seen over the last 2 years in particular, I don't think it's going away. I think it's only growing, which is a little mind-boggling, to be honest. But we're leaning into it, and we're growing with it. And it's really important that organizations don't wait on this. It's not, you're losing out on value. You're losing out on financial value if you, and environmental value. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows the environmental part. You're losing out on financial value if you wait. Like, that's the obvious example now that I hope people, even if you don't understand the climate emergency, that you get that part of it, and that drives action. That's key.
What an amazing note to finish on. And I feel as though I have to draw a line, because we could just keep talking, but people will be like, okay, they need to get on with their day now. But it was so wonderful to have you on, and so much stuff for people, I think, to reflect on there and take away. So thank you a million for joining us on the podcast. And everyone, that was Lee Spivak, Senior Manager of Advisory Services at WM. Thanks for listening to the Climate of Sport podcast. Please like and subscribe, and get in touch if you want to share information about the work that you're doing, if you want to appear as a guest, or you want to recommend guests, or you just have ideas of conversations you'd like us to have. You can get in touch by emailing info@sportpositivesummit.com.